I've watched financial markets long enough to recognize a pattern that never seems to change. Every cycle arrives with new stories, new explanations, and new confidence that the system is stronger than before. People don't suddenly become reckless. They slowly grow comfortable. Risk doesn't announce itself. It builds quietly when conditions feel safe and rewards feel easy. Trouble begins when comfort is mistaken for stability. Rising prices create the illusion that uncertainty has been solved, when in reality, it has only been postponed. This is why the most dangerous moments in finance often come after long periods of calm, not during obvious stress. By the time fear arrives, the groundwork for mistakes has already been laid. When uncertainty finally shows up, behavior shifts faster than reality. Decisions feel urgent, patience disappears, and emotion replaces structure. Financial crises don't destroy wealth automatically. They expose who prepared for discomfort and who assumed it would never arrive. If 2026 becomes financially difficult, survival will not depend on prediction or intelligence. It will depend on discipline, flexibility, and the ability to avoid costly decisions when pressure is highest. In strong markets, cash often feels like a mistake. When prices are rising and optimism is everywhere, holding cash can feel uncomfortable, even irresponsible. People compare returns, look at what others are making, and begin to feel that standing still is the same as falling behind. This is how cash slowly becomes unpopular, not because it is useless, but because it offers no excitement during good times. The truth is that cash is not meant to perform when markets are calm. It is meant to function when markets are stressed. Its role is not to maximize returns in favorable conditions, but to preserve control when conditions become uncertain. During financial downturns, prices do not collapse because businesses suddenly lose all value. They fall because people are forced to sell, often to meet obligations, reduce leverage, or simply escape discomfort. Forced selling creates distortions. Assets become cheaper, not because they are permanently damaged, but because liquidity becomes scarce and fear becomes dominant. Cash allows you to observe this process without being part of it. It gives you the ability to wait, to think clearly, and to act deliberately rather than react emotionally. Without cash, even correct long-term ideas can turn into short-term mistakes. Cash also provides psychological stability. When you are liquid, you are less vulnerable to headlines, market swings, and external pressure. You don't need to make decisions simply to feel relief. You can afford to slow down when others are rushing. This mental advantage is often more important than any numerical return cash might generate. In every financial crisis, the same pattern appears. Those who maintain liquidity gain flexibility, while those who stretch themselves too far lose options. Cash rarely looks intelligent during optimism, but it quietly determines who retains control when optimism disappears. In difficult periods, survival is not about being fully invested. It is about not being forced to act at the wrong time. Kalau mau lanjut. Point 2. Aku siapin dengan kedalam. Most people believe debt is dangerous because it increases risk, but that explanation misses the real problem. Risk can be managed, diversified, or delayed. Time cannot. The true cost of debt is not volatility. It is the loss of control over when decisions must be made. When markets are calm, debt feels manageable, payments are routine, income feels predictable, and leverage often looks efficient. But financial stress changes the rules quickly. When prices fall or income becomes uncertain, debt turns patience into a liability. Suddenly, waiting is no longer an option. Decisions are forced, not because they are wise, but because obligations demand action. Time is the most valuable asset during a financial crisis. Time allows fear to fade, conditions to stabilize, and information to become clearer. It gives businesses the chance to adapt and individuals the chance to think. Debt removes that advantage by compressing timelines. It forces decisions at the worst possible moments, when emotions are highest and clarity is lowest. Many permanent financial losses occur not because people were wrong about the long-term outcome, but because they were forced to act too early. Assets are sold not because they are bad, but because liquidity is needed. Positions are closed not because the thesis failed, but because pressure became unbearable. Debt turns temporary problems into irreversible outcomes. Reducing debt is not about avoiding risk entirely. It is about preserving flexibility. It is about ensuring that when uncertainty arrives, you still have the ability to wait. Survival during a crisis rarely belongs to those with the most aggressive strategies. It belongs to those who maintain control over their time, their choices, and their responses when conditions become uncomfortable. Prices move faster than reality, and they always have. Markets react instantly to news, speculation, and emotion, while the underlying businesses behind those prices operate on much slower timelines. They produce goods, deliver services, pay employees, and adapt gradually, even when market prices are moving violently. During periods of financial stress, this gap between price and reality becomes wider. Screens turn red, confidence disappears, and many people assume that falling prices must mean something permanent has broken. In reality, price is often just a reflection of fear, not a clear assessment of long-term value. The difference between surviving a crisis and being damaged by it often comes down to perspective. Traders experience every movement emotionally because their focus is on short-term price changes. Each fluctuation feels personal, urgent, and meaningful. Owners, on the other hand, focus on durability. They care about whether the business will continue to generate cash, remain relevant, and adapt to changing conditions over time. Thinking like an owner forces you to ask different questions. Not what the market will do tomorrow, but whether the business will still matter years from now. Not whether sentiment is negative today, but whether the underlying economics remain intact. This shift in thinking reduces emotional noise and increases clarity when markets are volatile. Crises punish attention on short-term movements and reward focus on fundamentals. Those who anchor their decisions to screens and headlines feel every shock. Those who anchor their decisions to long-term earning power are better positioned to remain calm. In difficult periods, survival is not about predicting price movements. It is about understanding the difference between temporary fear and permanent damage and responding accordingly. Fear is loud because fear sells. Financial headlines are designed to capture attention, not to provide perspective. During periods of uncertainty, information does not slow down to help people think more clearly. It speeds up, becomes repetitive, and often exaggerates short-term developments until they feel permanent and unavoidable. This constant stream of noise creates a distorted sense of urgency. When every headline sounds alarming, doing nothing begins to feel irresponsible. People confuse activity with intelligence and reaction with control. In reality, reacting quickly to incomplete or emotional information is often the fastest way to turn manageable problems into lasting damage. Markets move not only on fundamentals, but on emotion. When fear spreads, it reinforces itself. One reaction leads to another, and soon decisions are being made not because they are well thought out, but because standing still feels unbearable. This is how volatility turns into loss, not through bad information, but through emotional timing. Remaining calm during these periods is not natural. Calm feels uncomfortable when everyone around you is panicking and acting with urgency. But that discomfort is not a signal that something is wrong. It is the price of independent thinking. Emotional discomfort is often the cost of avoiding emotional mistakes. Those who survive crises are rarely the ones who consume the most information. They are the ones who filter it best. They understand that more input does not automatically lead to better decisions. In fact, too much information during periods of stress often reduces clarity rather than improving it. Financial history shows a consistent pattern. Wealth is transferred from those who feel compelled to act immediately to those who can remain patient while uncertainty plays out. Ignoring noise does not mean ignoring reality. It means separating signal from emotion, slowing down responses, and refusing to let headlines dictate decisions that should be guided by long-term thinking. Most people associate progress with action. When something feels wrong, the instinctive response is to move, adjust, fix, or react. In everyday life, that instinct often makes sense. In financial markets, especially during crises, that instinct is frequently dangerous. During periods of uncertainty, doing nothing feels irresponsible. Prices are moving, headlines are alarming, and everyone seems to be making decisions. Standing still can feel like failure, even when there is no clear action that improves the situation. This psychological pressure is one of the most underestimated forces in finance. Many financial mistakes are not caused by lack of knowledge. They are caused by the inability to tolerate discomfort. When fear rises, people act not because they have a better plan, but because action provides temporary emotional relief. Unfortunately, relief is not the same thing as improvement. Decisions made to reduce anxiety often increase long-term damage. Discipline is not about constant activity. It is about restraint. It is about recognizing when action increases risk instead of reducing it. In uncertain environments, waiting is not passive. Waiting is an active decision to preserve flexibility, capital, and clarity until conditions improve or information becomes more reliable. Some of the most successful financial outcomes come not from bold moves, but from avoided mistakes. Not selling at the wrong time, not chasing false certainty, not reacting to fear simply because it is uncomfortable to remain still. These non-decisions rarely feel impressive, but they are often the difference between temporary stress and permanent loss. Survival during a crisis rarely belongs to those who move the fastest. It belongs to those who can slow themselves down when everything around them is speeding up. Doing nothing, when there is nothing intelligent to do, is not weakness. It is control. Every financial crisis feels personal when you are living through it. Numbers on a screen begin to affect real decisions, real emotions, and real lives. Uncertainty feels constant, and clarity feels distant. In those moments, it is easy to believe that something has gone permanently wrong, even when history suggests otherwise. What experience teaches is that markets do not end. They move through cycles of confidence and fear, excess and correction. Systems adapt, businesses adjust, conditions change. The real question is not whether uncertainty will appear, but whether you will be prepared to live through it without damaging your future. Survival in difficult periods is rarely about prediction. It is not about knowing exactly when conditions will improve or which headline will matter most. It is about structure. It is about habits that preserve flexibility, protect time, and reduce the need for emotional decisions when pressure is highest. The principles discussed here are not exciting, and they are not comforting in the moment. They often feel slow, conservative, and unsatisfying when optimism dominates. But they are the kinds of principles that quietly protect people when optimism fades and stress takes over. If 2026 brings financial uncertainty, remember that you do not need to be fearless. You do not need to be aggressive. You do not need to be right about the future. You only need to remain rational long enough for conditions to change. Preparation is quiet, panic is loud, and the difference between the two is often decided long before a crisis begins.